I didn't realize that Solzhenitsyn was so
He was.
pivotal.
Yes. And as a matter of fact, interestingly enough, since you raised that, he even came to one of our old priestess, old believer churches in New Jersey, the place called Millville, New Jersey, about 40 miles away from Philadelphia, one of our centers of our old believers who came from Suwałki, Poland. And he came there, I think, clearly with the idea that he wanted to really encourage this kind of end to this long schism. Unfortunately, my former nastavnik, my mentor who had retired and gone there, I think he saw Solzhenitsyn's visit not so much as an attempt to reconciliation, but as in a sense of a sign of triumphalism. You see, Solzhenitsyn has come to us. He recognizes that we're the real Orthodox. And so I think Solzhenitsyn kind of after that went, okay, that's not what I was after. But no, Solzhenitsyn, I would tell you right now, I've been able to get connections, I would tell you right now that probably there's no doubt in my mind that after 42 years ago since we came to priesthood, I don't know that it would have ever happened, let's say, if it's not for Solzhenitsyn,
Wow.
who really pushes the Moscow Patriarchate when then the church abroad. I don't think I would have come to priesthood if those anathemas and curses still existed against the old belief. I feel like I can pretty much say I wouldn't have.
That's incredible.
So
And it
Solzhenitsyn, I guess I should pray for Solzhenitsyn every night.
and it does raise an interesting sort of not analogy, but maybe like an example to look to. So, I mean, granted, this is very speculative, but there's all these ecumenical dialogues between the non-Chalcedonian churches and the Chalcedonian churches. And it seems to me, I could be wrong, but there's often been reports where they've been able to come to like the same conclusion where they're almost there. Where for example, the Coptics have been able to like rephrase their Christology in their Miaphysitism in a way that was reconcilable with the diaphysitism of like the Greeks and the Russians, for example. But it does seem like even if they could come to the point where they say, yes, we believe the same faith, you have the issue of all of the anathemas that have been made against people like Severus and Dioscorus, who they consider saints, and yet the Orthodox consider heretics. And so then the question is, what do you do about that? And so, I mean, I don't know if removing the anathemas is possible, or if that itself would be considered anathema. You can't remove the anathema against Dioscorus, but what do you see in that? Because you're in a pretty unique situation. Could that be an example for the rest of the Orthodox world to look to as they, dialogue, at least the super old,
Well, I don't
non-Chalcedonian
think I don't
Orthodox?
think there's any question about that, and I think the tragedy in Christianity is, I think if we had the communications we have now, I'm not sure we would even have a split in the Christian church. Would we really have had a split on the filioque clause if you had people doing what we're doing right now? I mean, I think that they probably would have talked it out. And just to your very point, I think you'll find this fascinating. Again, we have a number of these Eritreans who come from the Ethiopian church who start coming to my church, and I made this point to them: you need to understand the idea of Monophysites and Chalcedonians. And I went to one of those. He invited me over to his house for dinner one day, one of these Eritreans. So we're sitting there, and he goes, "Well, he says this to me. He says the difference between us and you. He says to me, you don't believe in the two natures of Christ." And I went, "What?" He said, well, "We believe that there are two natures, the divine and human, fully divine." And I'm going, "No, we believe that. I've always been led to believe you don't believe that." He said, "Oh, of course we believe that." So you're right. This little nuance somewhere along the line there, exactly what you're talking about. And the funny thing was, a good number of I'll sometimes have like 25 of these Eritreans come to my church on a weekend, and when we're celebrating the Sunday of the Holy Fathers, and we start singing, particularly a couple of us ahead, and talking about the idea of, where you refuted the teachings of Dioscorus and Severus and so forth, and these Eritreans are standing there. I'm not sure they pick it up, going, "We're calling the people you think saints heretics." So, I are you getting this? Are you going to walk out on us? So you're
Right.
absolutely right. I mean, and that's a good point. I mean, it may sound stupid what I said before, But how could I have joined myself to a church that was basically saying the old rite and the old ritualists are all heretics? We're not heretics any more than you have to understand the old believers call the new rite heretics. You would play with the three-finger sign of the cross, you're a heretic. No, that's not heresy. Of course, people come to the idea of ignorance and lack of education where you can't tell the difference between ritual and dogma. But even if you get into dogmatic questions, a lot of time it's such slight nuances, and then you start throwing these anathemas around, and again, there's no way to even be able to communicate with one another. I completely agree with what you just said.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like you'd have to drop some of the anathemas in order to reconcile the communions, but I don't know.
And and thank God, I mean, the Russian Orthodox Church did, and literally in their decree in 1974, as so the Moscow Patriarchate, literally dropped the anathemas and said the old rite is orthodox and saving. Okay, now I'll listen to you.
Right.
Now I'll listen to you. And again, I would advise anybody who has listened to this, who has any interest, go read the book that's called Russia, Ritual, and Reform. It's by Paul Meyendorff, who is John Meyendorff, a really well-known theologian of the OCA. Paul Meyendorff wrote this book, and he really goes into the background of how the schism occurred.
Hello, everyone. Would you please consider supporting me on Patreon? I'm really enjoying making this podcast as a means of having interesting conversations with people in the arts and those who are interested in promoting beauty, especially in the liturgical arts. But I'm also doing this as a means of trying to help support my family. So if you would prayerfully consider supporting me on Patreon, it would mean the world to me. The first 20 people in the United States who sign up at any financial level, be that the $5 level or above, will get a free copy of my CD, Bach's Organ Mass, recorded on the Trost organ in Waltershausen. Thank you for your support.